So there's two ways we can do this for the getting started. One, we can go over how to configure Ortelius in like a Kubernetes cluster, or we can get into the Jenkins side of things, how we hook into Jenkins. So either way we can go. It doesn't matter to me. It's your choice, guys. And
I need both of those.
Yeah, and we'll do both of them. It's just a matter of which one you want to look at first today.
Oh, doesn't bother me actually, because I need both of them.
All right.
What about
so
you,
we'll go into the Jenkins side of things first, and kind of get you a feel of how Ortelius is going to fit into your Jenkins pipeline.
That's cool.
So you can start thinking about that side. That usually takes a little bit longer because you do have to update your Jenkins pipeline files. So let me get a couple screens cleaned up here. And we'll go to this guy.
New window.
Okay, let me share my screen. Or try to. Zoom can be such a pain sometimes.
Yeah, I know.
All right.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to look at one of our microservices for our demo application. So we have the hipster store demo application out there, and what we're going to do is we're going to focus on just this pipeline for this service. So typically we're going to have a pipeline for every service or workflow for every single service out there. So the one we're going to be working with is the email service as part of that process. So yes. So if we actually log in, make sure I got the right user ID. I think it's going to be under login. And we'll focus on the email service. So let me just get this out there. Get the filter right here. All right. So in order, if we have our pipeline here, and we're just going to be focusing on that one service, and some of the stuff that we want to capture, if we actually go into one of these older ones, is in this case the services are being built as containers. We're going to actually have the Jenkins job is going to be what's actually going to do the Docker build. We're going to grab some of the container information about where it was pushed, the digest, the information about the repo itself, the Helm chart that's actually used to install the service into the cluster. So that's kind of the information that we're going to gather from the Jenkins pipeline. Some other things, this is the new service catalog data that we're gathering, the owner, the README file, those type of things. So if we actually look at the code itself, So clean this up. Let me see if I have that repo local. Don't see it there. All right. So I'm just going to bring up the Jenkins file so we can kind of walk through what's happening on it. So this is the actual service. The service itself isn't that important for what we're doing, but basically it looks like it's a Python application that is going to provide the actual service. So from our point of view, what the service does and how it's put together, we don't care about that as much. What we want to do is actually look at how we can gather information about that service. So remember, in the Ortelius world, everything is a component or a version of a component. So in this case, we are going to, this is the Jenkins file. I simplified it drastically, so we're just focusing on the build step. Some of the things that we need to kind of set up. In this case, it's like, where is our server, our Ortelius server? What's the user ID that we're going to log in with, and the password that we have. Actually, let me make sure I'm actually hitting the wrong server here. Let me go against that one. While that's loading. So we're basically, this information here.
I'm on mute.
Let me see what else is out there that jumped in. Oh, come on. Nope, everybody's out there. So this part here, you can put into Jenkins at the system environment level. So you can set this up as regular credentials, credential objects and stuff like that. So at the Jenkins level, when you go to manage Jenkins, this is such an old version of Jenkins. You can configure like the user ID, the password at the Jenkins system level. So when we're looking at the definition in here, it's just going to be environment variables that you're going to reference. But for just simplification for people to follow, I just hard code them here. So this is not a requirement to expose the user ID password. That can be done at the Jenkins level. Some of the next stuff that we have is what is our application and our application version that we're going to package this microservice in. So one of the things that we do at the component level is we'll actually say what is the application that this belongs to, or who's the consuming application. So in the Ortelius world, everything is based on a dotted directory structure. So global is like the highest level. And then Santa Fe software is going to be our next level. Then the online store, candy store are going to be the different domains underneath that. And then we're going to deploy out to an AWS environment. From what I remember is this one is going to build, and I don't think we're going to do the deploy. Oh, we do. We record the deployment. So in this case, we're going to record that the deployment went out to this environment. So an environment in the Ortelius world is just going to be a set of endpoints. It's just a way to gather together. So you could have an endpoint that could be your database server. You could have your Kubernetes cluster as an endpoint, and then you may have like a on-prem VM that's running the monolith, for example. So the environment can be comprised of any number or any types of endpoints. Basically, the environment is representing a place that we deployed to. The next part that we have is going to be the component name. So in this case, we're going to be working with our email service, our base component version. So this is the schematic version that we're going to be utilizing. Let me see if I got logged in here. Change up our filter. And go to domain. Can't remember what it was, our domain. Santa Fe software. I just got a little bit of test data, so let me filter through it. Now, let me. Oh, I'm just trying to find. I have so many test databases. I got to make sure I point to the right one. I think it's going to be off of this one. Sometimes I'll route through my. There it is. Perfect. So if we look at email. So here's our email service that's coming across. And we can see that we did our deployment over to the AWS cluster. So remember, we have the schematic version, the 1.2.0. What that's getting mapped to over on the Ortelius side is going to be that part of the name. I'll show you where we pull everything together, but we want to start the base part of the schematic version. It's kind of hard coded. The last part is going to be the build number or the job number coming from Jenkins, and then we have the git commit as the last part. We put the underscore G or the dash G just to signify that this is the actual commit. So when we parse, it just allows us to parse this this string very easily. So we have our service name, our component name, the base schematic version. In this case, we're adding a custom action to it, which is going to be the Helm chart action, which allows us to deploy from Ortelius using a Helm chart. The chart name, the chart version. Sometimes the chart version may be derived. So if you have like a chart museum and that you want to go ahead and query chart museum for the latest chart, you can do that. Or the developers may go ahead and hard code which chart they want to use, which version of the chart they want to use for this deployment. The image registry, this is where we push our images over to. I like Quay over Docker Hub. It doesn't have the restrictions like Docker Hub has, and it's much more stable. We're just going to tag it as latest. And then this is some of the new service catalog data that we're pulling in. Service owner, email, phone number as part of that. So this is kind of like your base information that we need to set up. Now, some of this information I'm looking at putting into a TOML file and being able to read that in and expose it as environment variables instead of having it as part of the Jenkins file. And the reason being is what we've run into is not every developer has access to update the Jenkins files. Those are controlled by another group. So if they want to change like the service owner or the service phone number, they don't have access to do that because it's more like a generic Jenkins file. So we're looking at a way to have a file that either it'll be TOML or YAML that the developers will actually have access to in their repo to be able to define this information. So now we do some shell scripting magic. Some of the things that we're doing here is to determine the git branch. So there's some crazy git commits, git commands to figure out what branch you're on, and that's going to provide us the branch name. This will basically work on any what ends up happening in the Jenkins side is Jenkins will create a detached branch for the job. And because of that, it gets into this weird state of trying to figure out who you came from. And that's what this crazy command does, is figure that out at that level. And then the git URL, another git command to figure out what the remote URL is, whether it's going to be the SSH version or the HTTPS version of the URL. If at all possible, I try to use, and I would recommend that you get your SSH keys in place and do everything over SSH for your Git interaction. It's just going to save any hiccups down the road where like you can't get logged into a repo or something like that because somebody forgot to give you access. So whenever possible, use the SSH version of it. So that's going to be our full URL. Some of the things that we want is just going to be like the git repo name. So here we just go ahead and do some sed commands to pull out what the repo name is. And that's going to give us the basically the organization slash repository. So in our case here, that is going to be where this repo is stored. Where's email? It'll look like this. It'll be Ortelius slash store dash email service. Oh, there it is. Will be the repo that this part of it is what will end up in that variable at that level. And then from there, we go and grab the short commit and get that off of the log. The build date is we just take the date, clean it up a little bit. The build ID, build URL, these are just coming from the Jenkins environment variables. So nothing fancy there. And then one of the things that we do at the component version level is and this is totally optional, but I find it's very useful, is the variant. So you have your base version, in our case, it's email service. The variant is going to be the branch that you're on. Now, this could be like the PR that is being used. It could be a branch like maybe like maintenance. It could be a branch like for feature requests, say, new UI would be that branch. But what we've recognized is within a brand or a variant, you can have additional schemas within that. So let's say we're on the maintenance branch and we're going to iterate through multiple builds on the maintenance branch that we were going to push out to our cluster. We kind of want to keep track that the variant is the maintenance branch and that we're going to go ahead and iterate from 1.2.0, build number to the next one. So we're going to keep on doing multiple builds for that variant as part of that. So I would recommend using a variant. In the Ortelius world, that's where we'll see that we have our service name and then our variant, which in this case we're on master. And then within master, we're going and iterating through the builds. And you can see here, we didn't do a check-in, so we didn't get a new commit, but we are doing new builds. So we went from 70 to 70, 71, 72, all for the same commit. So basically, this is just me rerunning the jobs What it allows us to do is have new component versions on the Ortelius side that we want to be able to deploy. From there, we're going to kind of tie all that together, and that's what that is doing there. We're pulling that the whole version string together. Now, one of the things that we're adding for the service catalog is bringing in the README file as part of that process. So we're basically checking to see if there's a README file locally, and this is actually going to change up this format a little bit down the road. But basically, we're checking to see if there's a README that we want to associate with our image. Then our image tag. This one is basically creating the tag that we're going to use on the image that we're going to push to Quay. You can, whatever one that you already have in place, you can use, just take this off or supply your format for your image tag that you have, whether it's gonna be like latest, but same concept. We tag everything with the branch, so it's gonna be master, our component version number, and the commit. It just makes it handy, have a unique tag out there. Now we're actually going to get into this step. So all of this, so when you implement Ortelius into your pipeline, this is kind of like the required piece for kind of like the hard-coded provide me data step. This is going to be all the derived values that we're able to derive from the build environment. This is where we're going to do any overrides of the image, and then we actually get into the build step. So your build step and your push I just put in a generic build and push, but based on yours, you can just plop your, pre-build. You're going to want to put this in. Post-build, we're going to want, you do your build step, and then we do a magic command after the push. So one of the weird things with Docker is you don't get a Docker digest until the image has been pushed to a remote registry. So any image that's been built locally doesn't have a digest associated with it. You don't get the digest until you actually do the push. And then from there, you can inspect the registry, that actual tag to get the image digest. It's a weird quirk, but that step has to be done after, post push at that level. So, you put your build, kind of put your build step in here, however you're doing it. We've had people use Conoco, Builda, Docker builds. There's a bunch of different build tools, but in general, that's going to happen. And then once post push, we're going to grab our digest, and then we're going to record all of this with Ortelius. So basically, we're going to go ahead and start pushing all this information up to Ortelius for this component version. Now, one of the things that we're doing here is we're actually going to save this this information that we're gathering, and we're going to persist it to a file. And the reason being is if we have to do, let's say we have multiple services that we're building in a single workflow, instead of having one workflow per service. So let's say we're going to build 4 services and one right after another. We'll actually go ahead and run this step for each service that's getting created, but we'll keep on persisting it to the same file. And what ends up happening is we'll use that file later on when we record that a deployment happens. Now, in this case, we are going to basically update our component, tell Ortelius that there's a new version out there. Ortelius comes back and says, okay, I just created a new version for you. Here's the information. We're going to put that into that JSON file. And then eventually we're going to record the deployment here, where we're going to utilize that information and that application version information later on. Now you'll see here at the component level, we don't have anything to do with the application. So if you have the service that's going to be created, you don't know what the application is yet, that type of scenario, who the consumers is, we'll deal with that at the deployment time. So here we're actually going to record the deployment being done. And the reason why we're recording it is we're giving it a deployment data and deployment environment. Now we could actually do the deployment from Ortelius, and we just leave off a couple parameters at that level. So if we do the deployment through Ortelius, we're actually going to execute this custom action to do the deployment. So it just depends on how you have things plumbed together, whether you're going to have the Jenkins pipeline continue doing the deployment, or if you're going to switch over to Ortelius doing the deployment. Either way, it doesn't matter to us. We're going to gather the information. One of the advantages of utilizing Ortelius to do the deployment is when we deploy this application version to the environment, we'll incrementally figure out what's changed and only deploy the changed pieces for that application version. So we're not going to redeploy everything all the time. And typically the deployment step will be somewhere else in your pipeline. You may do a bunch of like security scans, some test cases, and then eventually you go and do the deployment. So in your pipeline, you probably won't see the update component and the deploy next to each other, like in this sample. They'll be spread apart in where you are in your pipeline process. So the end result is when we actually run this, get back to our email service. We'll go ahead and, this may not work because I'm not pointing to the correct database, but we'll see what happens. So we can see the running the shell script. That's that part of the derived values that we're going through and figuring out. We've taken our Docker file. We're going to tag it with our new build number, and we're going to have that commit out here. So it takes a few minutes for it to build that Python image. Then it's going to get pushed, and we'll get a new version over here. I'm actually going to bring up a local. See if we log into this one as well. I'm kind of running it through my debugger, so that's why it's taking a little bit longer than normal. Any questions up to here?
Here's my Zoom. No, I've just got lots of. I've just seen so many cool ways of using this.
Yeah. So the overall goal is to, be able to capture what's happening in your pipeline and record it into Ortelius. So we capture that information, and then we can build up the relationships around that, how things are being consumed and related together.
Is it possible to integrate it into a pipeline that's already been set up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, sorry, I haven't got too much experience with setting up Jenkins. So
nope. All you will, yeah. So all you'll have to do is, that's why I try to make this Jenkins file as small as possible. So you'll just need to define some of that information. Basically, you can cut and paste this in, change your domain names, what you're going to call things, your login.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, like basically what I would call the hard coded piece,
Yes.
just giving us some names, because, and some of this could be theoretically derived. So like you may have a domain out there that's everybody's going to be using. So you haven't gotten to a domain driven design level yet. So you're just going to throw everything, let's say, into the company store level, which is fine, store services. And then something like the email service could be coming from the job name, for example. So it could be, instead of hard coding it, you can use the workflow name as that. There's so many variables that people expose in their Jenkins files and their Jenkins libraries that a lot of this can be derived. And then the next section, you plop in the derived values, and that's just going to go all pre your build step. And then post build step, you're going to grab your digest and you're going to go ahead and add in typically these two. And that's it. You're up and going with your pipeline then. Now people get fancy down the road. They'll move this stuff into functions, groovy functions or methods. And then, or they may have a like the build step. They'll take this and put it into a groovy library, and they'll say they'll do the build in the library. And then what you do is in that library, just add on the Ortelius pieces. So when you do it that way, everybody gets, it's kind of like templating it. Everybody that uses that library will start recording automatically into Ortelius.
It's like a generic file. No matter which pipeline is used, it's generically going to be, doesn't matter what people are doing in their pipelines, it'll be logging all the time.
Yep, exactly. And that's a really good way to think of it, Sasha, is we're just going to be doing some additional logging. We're going to log what you're creating in your Jenkins file. So that's what, you can think of it. We're adding an additional logging steps in there.
So at the moment, everything's done. Yeah, like you just mentioned now with Groovy, I don't have control over that stuff. It's done by a run team. So I've got the pipe. I can use the pipelines whenever I want, or even create my own. So that's why I asked the question of how to integrate Jenkins. Yeah, I can integrate Ortelius into Jenkins.
Yeah. So do you have your Jenkins file handy?
I always have to we have to use a CI folder, and in there's config.json. And Jenkins looks at that config.json. Could I add Ortelius configuration into that as an extra? Or am I going off topic here?
Probably. Yes, I think you can. So we would be adding in to that JSON this information up here. What is your component?
Yeah, because config.json to me, I'm understanding that it's almost like if you, for example, if I use GitLab as an example, it needs a GitLab.yaml. This config.json file is just a controller file for Jenkins to know what to do and where to go, and basically to configure that pipeline. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm guessing in the config.json, you'd be able to define additional variables.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah. And what will probably happen is they will end up, you'll reference them as env dot, and then the variable name. More than likely, I'd have to look exactly how they're being referenced, or maybe like config dot something. And those from the config.json, those are going to get loaded into the workflow, and then you could reference them at that level.
Okay. Thanks.
So like instead of comp version, it may be env.comp version, because comp version is what we've defined up here. So it'll just be how you reference variables from the config.json.
Okay, that's great. That's really great.
So the one thing that you will need to add in there is the derived values somewhere. So I don't know. I don't think the config.json will be able to allow you to run commands. You'll have to see if it does or not. My guess is it doesn't.
I'm going to go there and do what I do best and see if I can break stuff.
Yep.
See what happens.
So
it's not production. It's infra. It's the playground.
Okay. So pre-build. You can even actually do this. A lot of this post-build as well. But basically, we want to log this derived information, the derived image digest. So you could actually do this as well. If you're not using like here, we're using the derived values, but if you ignore that and you're just using like predefined values, we can move a lot of this to post build, and you'll just need to add in the DH. So one thing I forgot to mention is, so this guy is a Python library. So
and just what you're looking at. So Ortelius is application agnostic. It doesn't care what you're building.
No, and it doesn't really matter the pipeline tool either, whether it's Jenkins or Cloud Build. If you look at our repos, we're using this exact same process, but under Cloud Build, Google Cloud Build.
Yeah. Okay, that's great.
So the library is still named under Deploy Hub, even though the repository, if you want to look at the source code for it, is this comp update. So the program that we're actually looking at is this one here. So this is the Python library. It runs under Python 3. You can do a pip3 install deploy hub, and that would install it into your Jenkins world. So that will be one thing as like a prerequisite. You'll need to install the deploy hub library. And this is all the documentation about the parameters and then the code. It's growing. I have some more updates. And then there is the supporting API library. And this deals with things like how to post JSON, get JSON, a lot of the low level interfacing, logging in. This is where the API level, you'll see where we're wrapping the RESTful API calls. And like, we need to get the deploy an application by application ID. That's what that's doing, to the environment, those types of things, waiting. So this is the implementation side, where we kind of wrapper all of our API calls as part of that process. And then the other file I just showed you, the DH file is basically the driver. So if you need anything on that side, that's the driver there that we just looked at. So that's where we'll be able to, this is what you're working with when you're back at this level. So when you do a pip install of deploy hub, it'll go and put it out here with all the corresponding dependencies and stuff. So it's a pretty simple install. One of the goals that we have is to make this Jenkins part as simple as possible, and as as minimally invasive into the pipeline process as we can make it. So, but you will have some, so Sasha, you will have some stuff that you could put into your config.json, but you still will need a couple little updates to your pipeline file, your Jenkins file. And then down the road, you could probably move those into the Jenkins libraries that they have. Like we have some folks that are have a library just to do the build, and then they have another library just to do a deployment through Helm. So they're actually deploying with Helm from Jenkins, and we just stick like this part in the build section, where after the component's been built, we want to log the information about the build. And then when they do the deployment from Jenkins using Helm, they have a little function to do that. We stuck this in that function as well. So it made it pretty easy for us to plug and play.
So Jenkins, when it sees a Jenkins file, it automatically will pick that up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Steve, I have some few questions. Can you go to the Ortelius board, dashboard?
Yep. Let me go over to this one.
Yep. Yes, absolutely. So we have, I think right now what I see that one is application folder, one is component folder. So that's a component mean that I have a separate microservices that I build up, or it's a multiple microservices in itself. So what the component actually in the Ortelius world?
So a component in the Ortelius, a version of a component equals a version of a microservice.
So it means every microservice, if I have, let's say, 10 microservices, so I have 10 components listed in Ortelius dashboard.
Exactly.
Yes, that's great. And another, because we're talking about the building the pipelines, what I feel from the last day I attending the CityCon, the people are questioning about that. Let's say you have a microservices, then you trigger out the build. But there are some few tools that are really feasible, like say somebody built a tool called Catch, or Shipacor built out a Catch tool that has some kind of manifest, and you don't need to put out the YAML file. So can I put out as, let's say, that a tool that build out the YAML file for myself and then deploy something to else? So these are the tools right now can configure into the Ortelius dashboard. Ortelius has some plug and play architecture with these tools.
Yeah, and that's where we went with the Python library, because it basically is a shell. It gets installed into those pipeline tools as a shell. So here we're running a shell command to run inside of Jenkins. If we look at one of ours, if we look at the web, or look at docs. So this is actually being done through Google Cloud Build. This is our documentation website. And you'll see here we're doing something very similar. So we're setting up those environment variables, the name of the application, the repo, those type of things. So you can see here is where we're deriving that, the version number again, as part of that. So it's the same data. It's just the way Google Cloud Build has you put everything in the environment level. And then we do our build and our push. So this is doing the build and push right here. And then from there, we actually run a command to go and get the digest. And then we do our comp update. And you can see here, we're running the same shell program with all the parameters. So it's the same concept. Will fit into any of the CI/CD tools. It just is slightly different implementations based on their language set. This is all based on running, containers and stuff like that at that point. So this is actually running a Docker image. So we actually take our DH program and wrapper it up into a container that's all ready to go as well. And you can run the container instead of installing the Python library. So our deploy hub comp update image has everything installed in it already, ready to go. So we can, and the short answer is we can fit into any of those tools.
Yes, definitely. I think that's people are looking at it because some of the CID tooling, you need to write 30 or 50 lines of YAML code. But there are some tools out there that build out their YAML code in 2 or 3 lines for
Right.
all kind of things. So I think that's really important. Another one question from my side is, do Ortelius have some kind of dashboard, like say in how microservices are interacting with each other, or some kind of dashboard, like what's in the service mesh side, there's some dashboard of how these microservices are interacting with each other.
Right. So let's take a look at a service. So I went into the cart service and a specific version of the cart service. I went into 150. And here we're looking at in the middle is the cart, the version of the cart service. And then these are the consuming applications. So Tracy calls this the blast radius. So if we break 150 here, these are going to be the application versions that are going to be affected by it. So if I blow this up, I'm going to take out these two on application versions. So this is from the view of, I have a service who's consuming me. Okay, so we have 2 application versions consuming me. Now, if we go to the other view, if we go to the application, so a version of the application is made up of, consumes versions of components or services. So in this case, we can see that we're consuming cart service 150 here. And all these other services at this level. Now, one of the things we recognize is that this layout is not going to scale to 100 or 200 services. So that's on a to-do list to rework. Same with this. This is another view of that same map. In the middle is the application and all the consuming services. Now, one of the things to answer your question is, do we have a map showing service to service interaction? Not yet. That is where we are going to be adding on. So this is like everything I'm consuming. And I want to make sure that I have all the right versions in my runtime environment for this version of my application to run. Now, down the road, we're going to take service mesh information and Prometheus, Grafana, those types of logging and telemetry metrics, and overlay it on top of this as well. So we'll be able to define service to service, or see service to service transactions, as well as we're going to introduce what's called a component set. Let's say we want the payment service and the shipping service. These two here, we want to tightly couple. So they're always deployed. These two, version 16 of the payment service and version 17 of the shipping service, are always deployed together. That's going to be what we're calling a component set. And we'll tightly couple those services, those versions of the services together in a component set. And then the application will consume a component set at that level. Another thing I've been working on with like Karam is being able to map out the hierarchy of component sets and services. So it looks like it'll probably be a mix of the domain hierarchy plus the component set grouping as well. So that's kind of where we see things. Other things that are coming, let me.
Yeah, sorry, I can see how that map won't scale. For example, there's an application that we have to migrate 150 repos.
Yeah.
You know, like you're going to have a big problem trying to visualize that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's all broken down into 150 service components, basically, if we're talking Ortelius, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to put that in Ortelius.
Yeah, you'll need to. So just to give you a highlight of some of the additional service catalog data. Let me see which I can remember.
The beginning of the URL starts small because I got to figure this out myself.
Yeah.
That's just an example of a real world application where you've got all these microservices.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I can't remember which one I was playing with. I was going to show you some of the new stuff, but
what I like to do is in the dashboard is that when you have a visualizer, I see because we discussed that before, this service mesh and GitOps and these kind of things is on the roadmap. I want to see in the dashboard that I click on the service and by clicking the service, I can adding the sidecar into it, and then automatically behind the curtain service mesh is integrated into it. And when I click in there, I go back to the Linkerd or Istio dashboard and visualize all the metrics, how these things are happening.
exactly.
That's my dream because clicking on the services, you can integrate the sidecar and service mesh. You don't have to write so many YAML file. I think that's everyone is looking forward to it. If that is going to be happen there, I love that. This is absolutely people like about it.
Yeah. So some of the things I can't find the application version I was playing with, but some of the things like we're adding in like the PagerDuty service URL. So that'll be a clickable link to take you to the data on the service. You know, what is the escalation policy, that type of thing, who's the contact. So things like, and I'm at a component level. So one of the things that's tricky that you're talking about is visualizing that information across the pipeline. There's tools out there that will just look at like the production cluster, and we can look at the service mesh for production and give you a view of that. But if this service has been deployed to not only to it's made it through the pipeline, it's gone from dev to QA to production, I want to be able to see how the service mesh is acting and configured in QA versus how it's configured in production. So that's one of the challenges, because we sit so high up in the view of the world that we're looking across all the clusters, all the environments. And what we'll probably end up doing is adding on additional boxes here that will list the environment that this service has been deployed to, and do a link to say view service mesh, you know, view the container logs, you know, those type of things, view tracing. So those are going to be done at an environment by environment level. And then it gets even a little more complicated, because if you look at the prod environment and you're running, you know, like Uber or Airbnb runs multiple clusters in every single AWS region in the world. So you know, the number of clusters that like Airbnb is running is in the thousands just to support a single service. So we have this this additional layer that we have to kind of navigate through, that we have to work on the visualization side. But I hear what you're saying, and I want to get there too. We just got to figure out the right roadmap to do the navigation to get that all pulled together.
Yes, and before I let last question from my side, I see the one function and procs column in the Ortelius. What is there? It's going to be the serverless functions, or what function these are? I'm considering that to be the serverless functions.
Oh, so for serverless, serverless like Lambda function is just another another component version. So it doesn't, for us, we track it because we don't store anything. We just do pointers. We can point to the Git repo that is being used to store the Lambda code in. For example, there's where it is. When we deploy to Lambda, we record that we've run basically an AWS command to deploy the Lambda function into the serverless environment. We record all that information. So from there, we still could have like a Swagger endpoint file. So how to interact with that Lambda function. We could have that details. License consumption and CVEs probably aren't going to be as critical. I haven't figured out how to scan a Lambda. You can actually scan the Python code for the CVEs before it's placed up into AWS. But that's the type of thing that we're working on gathering. So the Swagger will be just for this service. What are the endpoints for this particular service that will capture that? That help?
Yes, absolutely. And one other option, I see that a customized types option in the dashboard, in the second last. So yeah. I think this is an option, some option for every microservices, every component, or it's a journal. It's a customized option for journal views, or it's for single resource. I can customize the way I want it to be.
Yeah. So we have a type. So this type is a container. If we look at customized types, it basically allows you to, one of the things that we'll do, I have a bunch of junk in here from my test data, but this case, let's say we have a MongoDB that, let me do this. Didn't filter. Oh, that's right. So let's say we have a MongoDB. Internally, when we assign a type to a component, the Ortelius deployment engine will use that to automatically route the component to the right endpoint. So you assign a component, a type to a component, and then when you define your endpoints, let me see if I have one. You will define what types that this endpoint can accept. So to give you an example, so this one has my local host will accept an application, it will act as an application server and act as a Kubernetes cluster or gateway. So in this case, like an application server would be like a Tomcat server, or a Jetty or something like that, you know, more traditional server. And the Kubernetes definition, it says this server knows how to talk to Kubernetes. What we do with the component types and the endpoint types is we'll automatically route at the deployment time using the Ortelius deployment engine, route components to the right endpoints as part of the deployment process. So let's say we'll just take a traditional application. We're going to deploy an ear file. And so we have an ear component and we have a database component for Mongo. We have two endpoints in our environment, one for the database server, one for the Tomcat server. When we go through and do our deployment, the deployment engine will go, oh, I have this component. It needs to go to the application server. That's going to be the ear file. I'll route that over to the Tomcat server. Now, my second component I have is the MongoDB server, is a MongoDB type. I know automatically to route that over to the Mongo database server as part of that process. So that's where the custom types and kind of come into play. If you're not using the Ortelius deployment engine, they're more for just like tagging and references.
I see the cow is being beamed up. I like it.
Yep.
I love the cow being beamed up. That's so cool. Bit of humor. Jeez, you need that. Can I ask a question around, you know, where you showed the PagerDuty? Is that a customizable list? Can you add your own, like could I add Opsgenie in there, for example?
For customized types?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Customize.
Yeah,
okay.
you can add any type you want.
Okay. That's customizable. Okay, cool. Thanks.
And then it will then associate over to the components. So, and that's one of the things, because we have a component really isn't a thing, you know, it's not like it's just a pointer to a thing. You can use a component for your Terraform. You can use a component for your test cases. You could use a component for your database, your containers, your serverless. Even config maps can be a component. And what that allows us to do is when we look at an application, I'm just going to pick one random here. We'll be able to associate which versions. I picked a bad one. Oh, here it is at the bottom. We can associate different versions of those components to that version of the application. So you can think of application versions as the packaging step, and we want to pull in different versions of the components into that version of, you know, that packaged version of the application. So if you need a specific version of your Terraform, then you need a specific version of your config map, or you need a specific version of your Istio of your service mesh to be defined. All those can be component versions that we're going to pull together and have it all in one place, so we understand what is our runtime environment for that application to, you know, to be able to execute.
It's super versatile. It's like it's just up to your imagination, really, and the environment that you're working in.
Yep.
That application, really.
Yeah. And you can have and then you can do you know, depending on if you're using the Ortelius deployment engine or if you're using an external one, you know, you can say, you know, I want to make sure that this test case was executed, and through the actions that we have, you know, you can have actions at the pre-post custom actions at the application level, the component level. So after something's deployed, post deployment, you could say, go run all the test cases I just deployed. And you can make sure that those are being executed and recorded as part of that process. Now, when we run that test case, it may be like a Selenium test that we're going to run. And if the Selenium test results are going to get recorded somewhere else, but we're going to know that this version of the test cases needed to be executed as part of that process. And you could do reporting and things like that. So you can interact with from, let's say we associate that we need to run the test case, you know, 20 against this version of the application. We can actually query from the Jenkins pipeline the list of components and the test cases, and we can say, oh, this application has these test cases associated with it. I'm going to get that list and pass it off to Jenkins now to go off and do all the actual heavy lifting and running the test cases for me.
Oh, that's amazing. just I'm going to use a work example
Mhm.
from Terraform. So they use Atlantis to control the who can apply basically. So could Ortelius replace a tool like that when it comes to Terraform? Would it or it's not designed for something like that?
No, what we would probably
Yeah.
not. I wouldn't go
Yeah.
to replacing that, but what you would want to do is to make the association that that is happening. So you have, what was Atlantis it was called?
Atlantis, yeah. So for example, if I go make a PR, right, I have to create my branch first and make a PR. Then I commit it. It does a plan, but it doesn't apply. The last gate is for someone from the cloud platform team to approve that, so that Atlantis will run the apply.
Yep.
So I was
So
just
that's
looking at how Ortelius could fit into that process or improve that process or give sort of better information back to people. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we would do is, are they running a Jenkins job to do the apply, or are they going into the Atlantis UI?
I don't have access to that part of it, but I assume it's probably Atlantis UI that's probably doing that. Yeah.
So let's assume that we can get notified that the apply was performed. And then we would go ahead and log that this version of the Terraform was applied to this environment, and that would get reflected back into the Ortelius and at the either at the environment level or as a component version to the application.
Yeah, because what I'm finding is that Atlantis will show you your output of the plan in the PR, right? So you can drop down like a little drop down, and it shows you what it ran, right? But once your PR has been approved and gone, it almost feels like it's like a bit of a mission. You got to go and find your PR again if you want to go and see what the output was. Even though it was successful, maybe you just want to go back and reference that, what actually happened then. Because I don't know, there could be some anomaly that happened and you want to try and trace,
Well, you want to see, you want to see what let's say you want to see what the number of nodes, if you had an auto scale turned on in your node pod.
Yeah, something like that.
And you just want to go look at the log to see how it defined your node pools. That information, that link, we can associate back to either at the component level or at the application level, or even at the environment level. We can do it at any of the three places.
Oh, wow.
And that's one of the things that is on the roadmap, is to version environments. So whenever you make an environment change, that we record that there's what would happen in that environment. Awesome. We changed a auto scale from off to on. That would be something that we'd want to record and version that environment. Even though the applications deployed that environment, we didn't change any of the services. We didn't change any of the image tags. We didn't change the replica set count. But at the environment level, we did do some cluster updates. We changed the node pools. We went from, we added in additional, we changed the VM, the underlying VM sizes. We
went from, give you a great example. Somebody changed the Istio service mesh. I think I might be getting the wrong terminology, so just correct me, guys. They changed it. I'm trying to remember what they did. Somebody changed the Istio service mesh. There was public and private, I think, and someone took the private off. So, and I had a big presentation to do on the Monday, and I couldn't port forward anymore. Someone, but we didn't know what had been changed, and we didn't know who had changed it.
Yep.
So I think Ortelius would have saved the day there very quickly. He said, "Oh yeah, this is what happened.
Yeah,
so someone's changed the service mesh from they turned off the private, so nobody could do anything."
Yep, exactly. So that's kind of where we're at. I know we kind of went a little bit of a roundabout, but we'll just kind of wrap up here. So, from the Jenkins pipeline perspective, we have two pieces. The first piece is defining the component version. So we'll have to inject some variable definitions into your Jenkins pipeline. And then we'll run the DH update component, which is logging what Jenkins has done for creating that new component version. And then the second step is the deploy piece. So we'll either deploy using the Ortelius's deployment engine, or we'll record that Jenkins did the deployment. Either way, we have that second step in our pipeline to record what happened as part of the action. And like you said, Sasha, Ortelius is logging what's happening in your pipeline process. And so we provide visibility into what's happening, because we know that a component was created. Now, some of the things we didn't get into that are available is if you create a new component and you don't know which applications are consuming it, as long as we have a base definition or at least one association, we can turn on a flag. It's like auto increment app. And what that will do is we'll take the old version of the component, we'll go find which applications teams are consuming it, and we'll go create new application versions for all those application teams consuming the new version of the service. So if you have the shared service that you don't know who's consuming it, we'll know and go create new application versions for those teams automatically. So they'll know that they have a new version that they need to test as part of that. And there's even ways to kick off test workflows down the pipeline, do a deployment and then do a test workflow, run the testing workflow as part of that process.
Basically, using my imagination, this is going to be a crazy statement. Ortelius would really probably map their whole internet and every single thing that is going on and every single component space and every single environment, really.
It theoretically could.
I'm just putting a really crazy thought out there,
It's all relationship management. So
yeah, it's all relationship management. So anything that's got a relationship with Ortelius, it will be recorded. Doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah. And that's
pretty radical.
Yeah. And like you said, Simon, bringing in service mesh data, overlaying telemetry, health metrics, service SLOs, how those are mapping on top of that. All the service catalog data is where we're really trying to pull it all together to be able to have a single place to go and view what's happening with a service. And like I said, doing it for prod's easy. If you look at, I'm just going to monitor prod and always look at what prod is doing, that's the easy part. But from the Ortelius side, we want to look at it from the highest point of view across every single cluster, every single environment, because you want to be able to compare what, production's running great. Do we have a mirror in QA? Are we in sync between QA and production? So the developer needs to test something, or we're getting a wobble in production. Are we seeing the same wobble in QA? Or if we're going to hit QA with a load test, how that's going to run, and if we need to make we need to have those comparisons in place to have that real world view of an application, not only from the production view, but from what the developers are making on their side, and their little changes, how they're going to affect all the way down the pipeline.
Wow. I've got so many creative ideas now. It's insane.
So, like I said, where to start is, go ahead, Simon.
Just last few, one of the recommendations, suggestion from my side is, I see in the cloud native landscape, that's pretty a very valid case. We talked about this before in the Discord as one of the projects that I really have an eye on for whenever this launch. His name is kubevela. So what you try to solve the problem is that you don't write a YAML file, you just write a configuration file. It's build out the YAML file for you and deploy to the Kubernetes. That's called open obligation model. So they do it tremendously, but later down the road, they do stuff that they don't expect to do, like progressive delivery. It's not a job for kubevela. So they're putting stuff so much into it. So they lost focus what is trying to solve the problem. So I think right now, Ortelius and Deploy Hub, there are so many, I think, we are living in a microservices world, and we have floods of information. We have floods of suggestion from the community, but we really try to focus what are the real hard problem that people trying to solve, and we have to solve those, and then we build that up. And if we go elsewhere, I think the story is going to be a shadow for us.
Yeah, yep, exactly. That's why I want to, I keep on bringing it back to versions of components and, versions of applications and how we can add to that without being too distracted. And there's another one along that same line, Simon. It's just got added to the CDF. It is shipwright. They're trying to do a small YAML type of world as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a great solution. I have tested it, not use it. I've tested it. It's a wonderful way of doing. I think it's building out the images, but it's doing so many intelligent stuff out of the box. You doesn't know. Like I think we have a build job for building the images. Docker is doing so. Docker is actually an entire stack that's doing so many things. Now people like to run their tools like Containerd, Cryo, building tools like BuildJar, Kaneko, and there is so much. I think the shipwright, I think it's an interunion of BuildJar and I think Kaneko. They have built in the union of both of those. So I think that's a great tool. I have tested out, I think 3 months ago. I have never tested about, but really happy that now they are going to the CDF.
Yep.
Wow, this is the
any
coolest
last
ever.
So hopefully that helps you think about how we can integrate into Jenkins. Next time we'll do one around the setup of Ortelius in Kubernetes. Specifically more on your world, Sasha, with SSL certs and how to configure the ingress into the cluster for running Ortelius.
Yeah, so this was one of the most amazing sessions ever because I want to run. My goal is to run Ortelius and show them a real live demo of it, actually with one of the applications for the business that it's being mapped.
Yeah. Because
I did a demo for people, and cool. Sure, there was test data. You've got the email service and all that. But I think if I can also show, and that was amazing. People loved it. Don't get me wrong. But if I can show them an application that the business is actually, they're like, then they'll be wow.
Yeah. So the changes into the Jenkins pipeline are minimal, but they'd still need to be made. And if you need help, just reach out and I'll point you where we need to make those updates. And then next time we'll get some time to go over the ingress for Ortelius into you're on AWS, right?
Yeah, AWS,
okay.
EKS, and RDS Aurora.
Okay. Yep, that's no problem. I just have to get the I have the solution, but it's not together. I have the Nginx running with the reverse proxy to Ortelius, but I don't have it with an SSL cert. And I have SSL for Deploy Hub running over on Google. It's running the SaaS version, so that has all the SSL stuff in it. But I need to merge the two. And then, on the Azure side, we're running Istio Service Mesh. We have an SSL cert installed into Istio. So there's this whole, we just got to figure out which one we want to pick.
Yeah, and the great thing is because I presented Ortelius, I got the green light to put it, I can put it in my infra environment, which I have access to, right? Which is like a playground. It's a playground environment in AWS that we're allowed to experiment in, and which is amazing. Yeah, it's like, wow. I'm not getting bold for it.
I think Sasha, when you have these kind of things, I think it's the perfect time to do some blog post writing for that, or might be putting on some YouTube video for that. And for the Kubernetes content and service mesh, I am absolutely up to it. I think we are doing this kind of stuff regularly because I think we are doing a R&D work a lot because we need to search on the internet what are the tools we need to integrate with Ortelius.
Yeah.
Before we reinventing the wheel, because there's so many tools out there that I think is help our job really easy. So I think we have to do this kind of session. And tonight, Steve, you put down so many great information to us, and hopefully we absorb the information. And on top of that information, we had some useful suggestion and useful feedback provided to you.
Yeah. It was, I think it was a really good working session. And if anybody needs any actual help on the implementation steps, now that we have the overview in place, we can do that as well. So thank you everybody for showing up today.
So cool.
If you have any questions, just reach out and we'll get this implemented.
When's the next one? Is it next Thursday?
Tuesday, and then I think Thursday, same time as well.
Oh, so it's each week.
I do 2 a week. One is like 4:30 Mountain Time on Tuesdays, or 3:30 Mountain Time. One of those two, but it's the afternoon my time on Tuesdays, and then on Thursday mornings.
Okay. Yeah, this is probably morning now, right? Yeah, this is best for me.
Okay.
I tried to click on the invite links, but those were only for this one and the next one, right? Those invite links, I don't know, they didn't work for me. I don't know if it was just me, maybe.
I will make sure that the invite links are set up correctly.
Just because I don't want to miss this. This was so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I believe they are on, I'll have to double check the shared calendar, but they should be on the shared calendar. So that's one place to double check. And I'll have to see, I may go in and change the invite link because I may be under Tracy's.
Okay.
That could be part of the difficulty.
Okay.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers,
Take care.
everyone.
Cheers.
Awesome. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.